Good morning, everyone. It is Friday, August 25th. Time for the AM edition of C2-A-Days, and it's our final day of C2-A-Days. This is show 39, I believe. We will have show number 40 this evening, but we are getting ready to wrap it up ahead of week 0 kicking off this weekend. But of course, if you have enjoyed our twice daily updates of fall camp news, injuries, things of that nature, we really would appreciate you giving this video a like and subscribing to the Campus to Canton YouTube channel. We will, even though C2-A-Days is wrapping up, we will continue to bring tons of great content to that YouTube channel. I know we've got some DFS stuff going. We will have our tailgate Saturday morning show going, wrapping up each week on Saturday night as well. So there's still plenty to come, and of course, if you want to stay up to date on this type of information, we do update our CFB Winning Edge FBS team profiles. Not just daily, not just twice a daily, but pretty much all day, every day with this type of news and information. We also are very involved in the Discord and the C2C Winning Edge tier channels specifically. You can find me just about any time. Always happy to answer any questions, follow up any news that we may pass along in those outlets. So let's get to today's roundup, and starting with Wisconsin. Jesse Temple of The Athletic. We haven't really mentioned Wisconsin much. They were pretty much a daily. There was a daily note or two early on in fall camp from a lot of them, Jesse Temple, but from Wisconsin as a whole. And it's been a little quiet over the last week to 10 days, but I did want to pass along a piece that Temple published recently about the transfers. He ranked the 15 incoming transfers for Wisconsin based on how much, how big of an impact we will expect them to have for the Badgers this year. And it, focuses or my main interest, I suppose, in this piece is that it gives us one more, maybe last piece of insight on how the wide receiver group could potentially be shaking out, because of course, as we've mentioned plenty, Phil Longo, new offensive coordinator, coming in. We're going to see a lot more, much heavier, we would expect, passing percentage. We're going to see an uptick in the number of passes that we're expecting at Wisconsin this year with that new offense. Unsurprisingly, Tanner Mordecai, the quarterback, was listed at number 1. And do expect that Mordecai is firmly entrenched as the signal caller there for the Badgers. Number 2, probably not a surprise if you followed C2-A-Days for the last 35 episodes or so, but Will Pauling, the transfer from Cincinnati, wasn't super productive for the Bearcats last year, had 12 receptions for 122 yards, but was certainly a player, as Temple mentions here, who burst onto the scene this spring, took control of the number 1 slot receiver role, which is, of course, the big, most productive, has a long history of producing the most productive players under Longo at his time at North Carolina and Ole Miss, and even prior to that, probably. But Pauling, as Temple mentioned, he says, don't be surprised if Pauling ends up leading the team in receptions because of his speed, catching ability, and the way Longo wants to take advantage of mismatches over the middle. So it looked like potentially that was going to be a little bit in doubt. Pauling, as we mentioned, maybe the second week of C2-A-Days, knocked his knee against a teammates in a practice session. But it seems that he is back fully healthy and expected to be potentially the top contributor among wide receiver transfers, at least. Number 3 on this list was Bryson Green. Number 6 was CJ Williams. And Temple did mention that Green and Williams play the same position. He gave the edge to Green because of his experience to date, but did say that Williams is absolutely, and quoting here from the piece, absolutely going to be a major piece to the offense. My personal opinion was that Williams, just the overall upside and raw talent, I think might give him the edge over Green, but Temple very close to the program, gets to see practice, which we of course don't, and talk to the people who are involved. So I do trust his reporting. He's been one of the very best, certainly for Wisconsin, and one of the many writers that we've leaned on pretty heavily throughout the 4 weeks that we've been doing this. So do trust what he says, and having 3 transfer wide receivers in the top 6, pretty important for this piece. Did want to follow up at the very end. Number 14 was Braden Locke, the now backup quarterback. Pretty early on in spring practice, it sounded like Locke established himself as the number 2 quarterback behind Mordecai. Nick Evers, the transfer, was listed at number 15, and he is currently the 4th quarterback on the depth charts, or at least there's not an official piece of paper yet, but Locke, it sounds like, is number 2, has been for quite a while, and according to Temple, looks like he's the future for Wisconsin at quarterback. At Georgia, following up something that we've mentioned quite a lot in the last few days, the running back situation, things have gotten thin, relatively speaking, for the Georgia Bulldogs. Mark Weissner of the Athens Banner-Herald noted in his most recent piece that the first running back in drills on Wednesday was redshirt freshman Andrew Paul. Paul is a favorite of the Campus to Canton group. Have been very high on him, especially compared to other outlets, but missed last season with a torn ACL. Wondered perhaps if that had limited his opportunity, especially with the highly rated true freshman Roderick Robinson coming in, with other guys who had had the opportunity to play more last year. But a potential silver lining to Kendall Milton's continued hamstring issues, which it sounds more and more like are going to perhaps keep him out of week 1 against UT Martin, with the knee injury that Dajan Edwards suffered. And then, of course, the most unfortunate news that we heard this week, that running back Branson Robinson is going to miss the season with a significant knee injury. As Kirby Smart said, according to Weissner, quoted here in the piece, it will be by committee like it always has been here. So it's not that Paul is just going to step in and carry a very heavy workload. Weissner did mention that Cash Jones and then Roderick Robinson were next up in line. He also mentioned Lenith Whitehead, recent transfer, was toward the back of the pack, but involved as well. So we'll see how it shakes out. We'll of course keep an eye on Milton and how quickly he can recover. Weissner was mentioning, that there's not necessarily a rush for Georgia to get Milton back for week 1 against UT Martin, or really week 2 against Ball State, but would like to hopefully get that running back room and some of the defensive issues that we've talked about, or injuries, I should say, that we've discussed, hopefully figured out by that September 16th home date against South Carolina, opening up SEC play. So, but as of right now, or at least as of Wednesday, and written up by Weissner recently, Andrew Paul perhaps penciled in as the top running back for week 1. I did go ahead and make those changes in our team profiles, did remove Milton and Edwards both from the projected depth charts, put in Paul. Went ahead and put Roderick Robinson at number 2, even though it does sound like Cash Jones probably has a lead over him. But yeah, that in itself was enough to bump Georgia down one spot in our power ranking. So definitely, Georgia's still highly, highly rated, one of the most talented teams in the country, top to bottom. A heavy favorite in just about every game this year. But some of these injuries and the way they're stacking up in our projected depth chart and our roster strength ratings on the offensive side of the ball, Georgia has slipped a bit. But they are now third in our FBS power ranking. So you're not going to see hardly anyone who doesn't have Georgia at number 1. But we calculate things a little bit differently, going player by player, position by position with those individual player ratings. And right now, Georgia's dealing with a few more injuries at some potentially key spots than some of the teams ahead of them, or some of the teams right there with them at the very top of the power rankings. At Colorado, there was an update on Alton McCaskill from Brian Howell of buffzone.com. We discussed also early in fall camp earlier this month that McCaskill had yet to be cleared. Apparently, that is still the case. Was still sporting a non-contact jersey. That sounds like, according to Howell, the second week of fall camp, he was expected to get back into full contact, but isn't quite there yet. So we've expected McCaskill potentially to miss a little time, or at least be limited in week 1. But the closer we get to that, next Saturday, the date on big time national TV, big stage on Fox, seems more and more like McCaskill may not be involved. So Colorado, of course, has brought in quite a few running backs to make that a fairly deep position for the Buffs, for Deion Sanders in his first year. But yeah, as of right now, they will be without McCaskill, it sounds like, and that could potentially be a little bit of an issue. So a little thinner at the running back position for the Buffs as well. At Ole Miss, Zachary Franklin is someone who has been dealing with some injuries as well. Tyler Comas of 247 Sports said that Franklin's status is, quote, up in the air for the next few weeks. So Franklin, the transfer from UTSA, was incredibly productive at his time in San Antonio, transferred, joined the Rebels earlier this year. And, there was certainly some opportunity to become maybe the top option at wideout, but Franklin not fully healthy. Sounds like to this point may or may not be. Specifically, Comas says no current timetable for his return. Doesn't sound good. So his status not only is a top wideout option or starter, sounds like he's potentially not going to see the field for a little bit. So that is definitely a bummer. Franklin, from a football specific standpoint, from a CFF or college fantasy football specific standpoint, I should say, has sort of tumbled down rankings and average draft position. He was a first or second rounder when it looked like he was headed back to UTSA in the very early drafts, very early months of the season. The transfer to Ole Miss dropped him a few rounds. Now, he's 15 to 20 plus rounds. Just things have not necessarily, the news has not necessarily been kind to Franklin, but hopefully he will be able to get back and healthy and contribute on the field sooner rather than later. But things not necessarily trending in the right direction from what we've seen over the last few months. South Carolina, Joshua Boucher of the State we've discussed quite a bit the wide receiver situation, specifically Anton Wells, Juice Wells, as to whether or not he will be healthy and available in week one. Coach Shane Beamer told reporters earlier this week, according to Boucher, my apologies for mispronouncing it, that Wells and then Armaine Brown and Xavier Legette, if they are all healthy, would be the three starting receivers this season. We've mentioned that Nick Harbor, the talented true freshman wide receiver, tight end, just overall really exciting athlete, is somebody to pay attention to. Will be in the mix, but had been a little bit banged up in recent weeks. But the name that was sort of the focus of this piece is Omega Blake, who is a sophomore, has been listed just about every practice report I've seen from a wide variety of South Carolina sources as being in the starting group with Wells not available. So it seems like he is the next player up. And there were some really, really positive quotes from coaches and teammates. One specifically, Spencer Rattler, from earlier this month, said, Omega's been a great weapon for us. He can go get the ball, high IQ football player. He's just got to learn the small little details. But he and Rattler did connect on a big-time pass play, 75-yard touchdown in the earlier scrimmage, August 12th. So he's someone who has climbed the depth chart, perhaps taken advantage of an opportunity, and could be a major contributor for the South Carolina Gamecocks this year. Somebody who could contribute at Illinois, according to Jeremy Warner of the Illinois or Illini Inquirer, Caden Fegan, the true freshman running back, is a name that he's seen mentioned more and more in recent weeks. Brett Bielema was quoted in this piece saying, I don't know if we targeted a young man as much as we did when I first got here, just the way he needed to be recruited, but we beat out literally everybody in the Big Ten and several private schools as well that wanted his talents. Just a great fit for our program in many different capacities. There's also Bielema very high on Fegan's performance in fall camp. Another quote here, I would say this fall he's changed a lot. I think everybody is excited to watch him run on our football team. When our players are excited to watch someone play, that tells me what we're getting. So Fegan, if you are unaware, is a giant, basically 6'3", 250-pound true freshman running back. As Warner said, Reggie Love and Josh McCray, and we've mentioned this before, are the top two options at running back. Aiden Lowry, and there's another big time, literally and figuratively, young running back in the mix in Jordan Anderson, 6'4", 240 there as well. But Fegan, according to this piece and according to the quotes from Brett Bielema, could be in line for a role sooner rather than later. So Josh McCray is similar in size, so it's not necessarily that Fegan would just immediately become the short yardage goal line back. However, there's a possibility there that he is in the mix for a role kind of like that. A couple of Group of Five notes to finish up this morning. Rachel Lindsay of the Buffalo News had a feature on Nick McMillan, redshirt freshman wide receiver for the Bulls, someone who's gotten a little bit of buzz. I know our Chris Moxley was high on McMillan, especially this spring. Partly, I'm sure, because he had a huge spring game where caught 4 passes, 134 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Now, both of those touchdowns did come when working with backup quarterbacks, Gunnar Gray and CJ Ogbonna, and in the second half of that spring game. Nevertheless, according to this piece, it sounds like McMillan has emerged as a starter for Buffalo. Lindsay mentioned that he's worked primarily with the first team offense during preseason practices and has really put himself in position to step into a role created by the departures of quite a few of Buffalo's top wide receivers last year. So from a CFF standpoint, I'm always a little bit skeptical of a redshirt freshman who really didn't play the previous year. McMillan falls into that category, but Buffalo was pretty old at receiver last season, had an established group of players, and McMillan just didn't quite factor in. Nevertheless, seems like he truly has stepped into potentially a starting role alongside, it sounds like, perhaps Maryland Johnson and Booby Curry as those top three, though Cole Harity is in the mix. They've got to transfer Darnell Harding Jr. as well. So some positive news, certainly some high praise for Nick McMillan in fall camp. And our last note, UTEP, who is playing in week 0. There's a write-up about the week 0 matchup with Jacksonville State by Brett Bloomquist of the El Paso Times. And there were a couple of interesting notes that caught my eye. It's not necessarily anything that is major news, I suppose, but it had not come to my attention that apparently UTEP does not tackle in practice, and people do different things. I know there are some Division I schools, programs that haven't tackled for years, and it just caught my eye a little bit because Jeremiah Knight, one of the starting linebackers, was quoted here in the piece, said, "I don't feel like we have to practice to tackle. You should know how to tackle. That's all in your heart, and everybody on defense has heart. I don't think tackling will be a problem." But there perhaps are some out there who remember in 2020 when Navy was just absolutely embarrassed in their opener against BYU. And part of the blame for that was that Navy just didn't practice tackling leading up to that game. And that was sort of a major storyline the following year for Coach Ken Niumatalolo. Never really was able to get back on track for him at Navy. And it probably wasn't all the tackling. And like I said, there are teams across the country who have things that they do, and many do avoid taking players down to the ground often in practice. Sometimes you'll line up for live team periods, but it might just be once or twice a practice, or 3 or 4 times a week, something like that. But not doing it at all, it makes me just a little bit nervous, especially in week 0 when sometimes tackling can be a little bit of an issue. Just knocking off the rust of a long off season, playing a new team, and Jacksonville State's going to run the football quite a bit, I would expect. So as someone, if you saw our week 0 team projections in the C2C Winning Edge tier of the Campus to Canton Discord, you'll know we're under the UTEP and Jacksonville State 52.5. Now I'm a little worried that we're going to see a couple of broken tackles and some long touchdown runs from Jacksonville State that put us in trouble. But there was a quote at the end that made me a little more, little less worried. But I'll still, I'm sure, continue to worry about it throughout the next 24 hours or so. But head coach Dana Dimmel of UTEP was quoted here in the piece by Bloomquist saying, "We tied for 4th in the country in time of possession, so that's what we do. It will be important for us to move the chains, get first downs, and keep the clock running." So, plenty of times in C2-A-Days so far, I've passed along some quotes or notes about what we might expect from pace of play for a particular team. Well, it sounds like UTEP is not expecting to do anything out of the ordinary, and the Miners currently rank 124th in our projected pace in terms of time between offensive plays. So sounds like that's very much in the game plan still for the Miners. That will do it for this morning. Again, this is our penultimate episode of C2-A-Days for the 2023 college football preseason. We will be back this evening to wrap it all up. We'll be hoping to find some, final news and notes to pass along for the Friday evening edition. But of course, we will continue to do many of the same, gathering techniques. Just focus more on putting that information into our team profiles, which we already do, in our Discord as well. So if you haven't yet, please do check us out, campus2canton.com, become a C2C Winning Edge tier member, and you'll be able to follow all of these news and updates in our Discord as we really continue to ramp up ahead of week 0 and week 1 of the 2023 college football season. Again, if you would, please give this video a like, follow the subscribe to the Campus to Canton YouTube channel, and we will see you again this evening. I am Nicholas Ian Allen for Campus to Canton, and C2-A-Days.